My neighbor hated my dog so much he tried to get him taken away. But one night when his house caught fire, guess who ran straight in to save him? Yep, my dog. And that moment changed everything. When I first adopted Max, my golden retriever, I thought my life was finally complete. He was the kind of dog who turned heads everywhere we went. Floppy ears, soulful brown eyes, and a tail that wagged like it had its own heartbeat. For me, Max wasn't just a pet. He was comfort, protection, and unconditional love all wrapped in golden fur. But not everyone saw him that way, especially not my neighbor, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker was the kind of man who always looked angry at the world. Late 60s, sharp eyes hidden under thick glasses, and a permanent scowl etched into his face. He lived alone in the house next to mine, and I swear I'd never seen a visitor knock on his door. No kids, no grandkids, no friends, just him and his meticulously trimmed yard. At first I thought maybe he was just a private person, but I quickly learned he had a special hatred reserved for Max. It started the very first week after I brought Max home. I'd let him out into the backyard to explore, and like any excited puppy, Max barked at the squirrels, the birds, even the wind. Not for long, just playful little woofs. Barely 10 minutes later, I heard it. "Shut that dog up!" I froze, my hand halfway through refilling Max's water bowl. I glanced toward the wooden fence that separated our yards, and sure enough, Mr. Whitaker's voice boomed again. Some of us don't want to live in a kennel. I remember my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I scooped Max up, carried him inside, and whispered, "It's okay, buddy. He just doesn't know you yet." But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't going to be the last of it. The next morning, I caught Mr. Whitaker standing at the edge of his yard, glaring at Max through the slats of the fence as if the poor pup had committed some unforgivable crime. Max, ever the friendly soul, wagged his tail and barked softly as if inviting him to play. Whitaker didn't smile. He muttered something under his breath, shook his head, and stormed back inside. That night, I found a note taped to my front door. Scrawled in angry handwriting, it read, "Control your dog or I'll call the authorities." I sat on my porch steps, staring at the paper, anger and disbelief bubbling inside me. Max was just a puppy. He wasn't dangerous, wasn't destructive. He was just happy. And yet, my neighbor already treated him like the devil himself. Max trotted up beside me, resting his chin on my knee, those big brown eyes full of innocence. I stroked his soft fur, whispering, "Don't worry, boy. He doesn't matter. We'll figure this out." But even as I said it, I felt a pit forming in my stomach. I had no idea just how far Mr. Whitaker's hatred would go, or how Max would one day change everything. Have you ever had a neighbor who hated your pet? What did they do? It didn't take long for Mr. Whitaker's threats to turn into action. 2 days after his angry note, I heard a sharp knock on my door. When I opened it, a city officer stood there, clipboard in hand. Max sat obediently at my side, tilting his head curiously. "Ma'am, we received a noise complaint," the officer said politely, though his eyes flickered toward Max with sympathy. I blinked. Noise complaint? He's a puppy. He barks, sure, but your neighbor claims the dog barks at all hours. I have to follow up. It's just procedure. I wanted to laugh. Max was playful, yes, but he wasn't one of those non-stop barkers. The officer must have seen the frustration on my face because he gave me a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. This doesn't go on record unless it's repeated. Just try to keep the dog quiet." As he left, Mr. Whitaker was already on his porch, arms crossed, smirking like he'd won some kind of battle. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about barking. This was about control. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. If Max barked for more than a minute at a squirrel, another complaint. If he wagged his tail too loud against the fence, another angry note. One evening, I was out in the yard tossing a tennis ball for Max. He bounded happily across the grass, his golden fur glowing in the sunset. Suddenly, Mr. Whitaker appeared at his back door and shouted across the fence. "Some of us like peace and quiet. Ever think of that?" I bit my tongue, gripping the tennis ball so hard it nearly popped. Max dropped it at my feet, tail wagging, oblivious to the tension. "He's just playing," I called back. "He's not hurting anyone." Whitaker scoffed. "He's a nuisance. If you can't control him, I'll make sure someone does." That night, I cried into Max's fur. I wasn't the type to cry easily, but the stress was gnawing at me. I loved my home. I'd worked hard for it, and Max, he wasn't just a dog. He was family. Yet here I was, feeling like a criminal in my own neighborhood because of one bitter old man. The breaking point came a week later. I found another note on my door, but this time it wasn't just a complaint. "If you don't shut that mutt up, I'll have animal control take him away. Consider this your final warning." My hands shook as I read it, my vision blurred with tears of rage. I rushed to the living room where Max was curled up on the couch, his chest rising and falling peacefully. The thought of someone taking him away made me sick. I sank onto the floor, hugging him tight. "They're not taking you," I whispered fiercely. "Not now, not ever." But deep down, a terrifying thought crept in. What if Mr. Whitaker actually could? Do you think neighbors should have the right to complain about barking dogs? By the following week, I felt like I was living under a microscope. Every time I let Max outside, I could sense Mr. Whitaker's eyes boring into us from behind his blinds. The faint movement of his curtain was enough to put me on edge. Max, of course, remained blissfully unaware. He'd chase squirrels, roll in the grass, and greet every butterfly like it was his best friend. But I couldn't relax. Every bark felt like a countdown to another complaint. Then the letter came. It wasn't handwritten this time, it was official, typed on crisp white paper, slipped into my mailbox. Homeowners Association violation, noise disturbance. My heart sank as I read the words. They claimed Max's barking violated HOA rules. If the complaints continued, I could face fines, or worse, removal of the pet. I stormed into my kitchen, the paper shaking in my hands. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. I called the number listed at the bottom, demanding to know what this was about. A bored-sounding woman on the other end told me, "We've received multiple reports about your dog's disruptive behavior. If it continues, we'll have to take action." Reports? From who? I snapped. "Your neighbor, Mr. Whitaker." "Of course." I hung up, slamming the phone on the counter so hard Max flinched. I immediately dropped to my knees and hugged him, apologizing. "I'm sorry, boy. It's not your fault. It's never your fault." The following weekend, things got even uglier. I was in the backyard gardening while Max lounged beside me when a police car pulled up out front. My stomach dropped. I wiped my hands on my jeans and hurried to the driveway. The officer stepped out, tipping his hat politely. "Afternoon, ma'am. We received a noise complaint again. This time the frustration bubbled over. Officer, please, he's just a dog. He barks occasionally, but he's not dangerous. My neighbor has it out for us." The officer gave me a sympathetic look. "I understand. Honestly, we deal with situations like this more than you'd think. You're not in trouble yet, but if complaints keep stacking up, animal control may get involved." My stomach twisted. The words animal control felt like a death sentence. When the officer left, I saw Mr. Whitaker standing smugly at the edge of his yard. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The smirk on his face said it all. That night, I lay awake listening to Max's soft snores. My mind raced. What if animal control really did come? What if I lost him because of a bitter old man with nothing better to do? I whispered into the darkness, more to myself than to Max. They can't take you. They won't. But even as I said it, my heart hammered with doubt, because deep down I knew Mr. Whitaker wasn't finished. He was only getting started. If your neighbor tried to get rid of your dog, how would you react? By the end of that month, I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally drained. Every bark from Max felt like a landmine, every day a gamble. Would it be another note, another call from the HOA, another police visit? I loved my home. It was my first real house, small but mine. I'd worked 2 jobs and saved for years to afford it. The backyard was the reason I bought it in the first place, dreaming of summer evenings with a dog by my side. Now every time I opened the sliding glass door, I felt anxiety tighten around my chest. One night, after Max barked at a raccoon scurrying across the fence, I found myself pacing the living room, chewing my nails until they hurt. The thought hit me. What if moving is the only way out? I hated myself for even considering it, but the constant stress was eating away at me. My work performance was slipping. My friends said I looked tired all the time, and even Max seemed to notice something was wrong. He'd nuzzle my hands with his wet nose when I cried, as if telling me not to give up. I started avoiding the backyard altogether, walking Max farther down the street for bathroom breaks instead of letting him run freely. Each time I'd glance nervously at Whitaker's house, half expecting him to come stomping out with another threat. One evening, as I clipped Max's leash on, my best friend Sarah called. She lived a few blocks away, and she knew everything. "You can't let him win," she said firmly when I confessed I was thinking about moving. "This is your home. Max is your family. You worked too hard to give it up over some bitter old man." "But what if they really take him from me, Sarah?" My voice cracked. "I couldn't live with myself if that happened." "Then fight," she said simply. "Fight for him. You owe it to both of you." Her words stuck with me. Later that night, I sat on the couch with Max's big head resting on my lap. His tail thumped softly against the cushions. "I don't know how to fight this, buddy," I whispered, stroking the silky fur between his ears. "But Sarah's right. We can't just give up." Max lifted his head and gave my face a big slobbery lick, as if sealing a pact between us. Still, the stress didn't magically disappear. I'd wake up in the middle of the night from nightmares of animal control trucks pulling into my driveway, faceless officers taking Max away while he whimpered for me. I'd sit bolt upright, heart racing, until I felt Max's warm body curled against me, safe and sound. Only then could I breathe again. I didn't know it yet, but the breaking point, the moment when everything boiled over, was just around the corner. And it would change everything. Do you believe pets can sense bad energy from people? It started small, a casual comment from Mrs. Diaz, who lived across the street. I was walking Max one morning, keeping my head down, when she waved me over. "Sweetheart," she said in her warm, motherly voice, "don't let that Whitaker man get to you. Everyone here knows Max is a good boy." I blinked at her, surprised. You don't mind his barking?" She laughed softly. "He's a dog. Dogs bark. Besides, I feel safer knowing he's watching the street. If anything suspicious happens, Max is the first one to notice." Her words melted some of the fear I'd been carrying. It was the first time in weeks I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. Later that week, I overheard 2 other neighbors talking by their mailboxes. "That dog's not the problem," one man muttered. "It's Whitaker. He complains about everything. Last year, it was the Miller kids' basketball hoop, then the Garcia's garden lights. Now it's the dog." "Yeah," the other agreed. "It's like he needs something to fight about." I kept walking, pretending not to hear, but inside my chest, something shifted. Hope. Not everyone was supportive, though. A few people avoided me, offering tight smiles instead of conversation. Some, I suspected, didn't want to be caught in the middle of Whitaker's war. Then came the community meeting. I almost didn't go. My stomach churned at the thought of facing Whitaker in front of everyone. But Sarah practically dragged me there, whispering, "You need to show them you're not afraid." The HOA president droned through the usual agenda. Lawn maintenance, parking rules, until Whitaker's hand shot up. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to address the noise nuisance," he announced, glaring directly at me. "That dog is out of control, and it's destroying the peace of this neighborhood." A ripple of whispers went through the room. My face burned. My hands shook in my lap, but before I could find the courage to speak, Mrs. Diaz stood up. "With all due respect," she said firmly, "Max is not a nuisance. He's a sweetheart. My grandchildren play outside every weekend, and he's never once scared them." Others chimed in too. "Better a barking dog than a break-in," someone muttered. "He's never bothered me," another added. Whitaker's face turned a furious shade of red. "You're all ignoring the rules. If we let one dog disturb the peace, what's next?" The president raised his hand. "Mr. Whitaker, we'll look into this further, but at this time, there doesn't appear to be a consensus that Max is causing a disturbance." For the first time, the battle didn't feel so one-sided. I left the meeting shaky but lighter, as though the weight of the neighborhood wasn't all pressing down on me anymore. That night, Sarah grinned at me over a glass of wine. "See? You've got people on your side. Whitaker might be loud, but he's not the only voice in this neighborhood." I smiled, stroking Max's ears as he dozed at my feet. For the first time in months, I believed her. "What's the most loyal thing your pet has ever done for you?" For a little while, things were quiet. Too quiet. After the HOA meeting, Whitaker avoided me. No more notes on my door, no more confrontations by the mailbox. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt uneasy, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. Max, on the other hand, seemed happier. I let him play in the yard more often, though I still hovered nervously, ready to call him inside if he barked too much. Most of the time, he lounged in the sun, tail wagging lazily. For a few fleeting days, it almost felt normal. Then it happened. It was a Saturday morning, crisp and cool. I had just brewed coffee when I heard Max growl, a deep, rumbling sound he only made when something wasn't right. I stepped outside and froze. Whitaker was standing at the edge of my yard. In his hand was a small spray bottle. Max was barking furiously, hackles raised. "What are you doing?" I shouted, rushing forward. Whitaker jumped back, stuffing the bottle into his pocket. "Teaching that mutt a lesson," he spat. "You think the neighborhood should suffer because you can't control your dog?" My blood boiled. "Are you insane? Were you trying to spray him with something?" "It's just vinegar," he sneered. "Dogs hate it. Maybe it'll keep him quiet." Max barked louder, straining against my grip on his collar. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold him. "Get off my property," I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. "If you ever try to hurt my dog again, I swear I'll call the police." He glared at me for a long moment, then muttered something under his breath and stormed back to his house. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of fury and fear. What if it hadn't been vinegar? What if it was something dangerous? I couldn't shake the image of Max foaming at the mouth, poisoned by a neighbor who hated him. Sarah came over as soon as I told her. "That's it," she said firmly. "You need to start documenting everything. Dates, times, pictures, everything. If he tries something again, you'll have proof." So that night, I set up a small camera facing the backyard. Not because I wanted to catch Max barking, but because I didn't trust Whitaker anymore. The tension only grew after that. Max barked whenever Whitaker stepped outside, as if he sensed the hostility. Whitaker shouted across the fence more than once, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, mutt," he yelled one evening. I pulled Max inside, heart pounding. It felt like we were living in a war zone. That night, as Max curled protectively at the foot of my bed, I whispered into the darkness. "I don't know how much longer I can take this." But I didn't know then. The war was about to take a turn neither of us expected. Do you think some neighbors just look for conflict no matter what? The night it all happened started like any other. I had tucked myself into bed with a book. Max curled at my feet, snoring softly. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. No cars, no voices, just the hum of the street lamp at the corner and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. At around midnight, I stirred awake. Max had lifted his head, ears perked. A low growl rumbled in his throat. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, sitting up. He bolted off the bed and ran to the window, barking sharply. My heart leapt. I glanced outside, expecting maybe a raccoon or stray cat, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Smoke. Thin wisps curling upward from Whitaker's house. At first I thought maybe it was just from a chimney, but then I saw the flicker of orange behind his curtains. My stomach dropped. Fire. Max barked louder, frantic, and I grabbed my phone to call 911. "There's a fire," I stammered into the phone, giving the dispatcher Whitaker's address. "Please hurry." The dispatcher promised help was on the way, but as I stood there, frozen, Max dashed to the door, pawing at it, whining. He knew someone was inside. I hesitated for a split second. Whitaker was my enemy, the man who had made my life miserable for months, but he was also a human being, alone and possibly asleep while his house burned. Okay, I shouted, pulling on my jacket. I clipped Max's leash, though he strained against it, desperate to run. The moment I opened the door, the smell of smoke hit me, thick and acrid. My lungs burned as I sprinted across the yard. "Mr. Whitaker," I screamed, pounding on his door. No answer. The smoke was heavier here, curling out through the eaves. Max barked furiously, scratching at the door as if begging me to hurry. I twisted the knob. It was unlocked. Heat blasted my face as I pushed it open. The living room was a haze of smoke, the glow of flames coming from deeper inside. "Mr. Whitaker," I shouted again, coughing. Then I heard it, a faint groan. Max lunged forward, dragging me down the hall. His nose worked furiously, and I realized he was following the sound. We found him collapsed in the kitchen, half conscious, smoke swirling around him. "Oh my God," I gasped, dropping to his side. "Help me, Max." Max barked and circled Whitaker, then darted back toward the front door as if urging me to hurry. My adrenaline spiked. I hooked my arms under Whitaker's shoulders and began dragging him, coughing so hard my chest ached. "Come on, Max, lead the way." Max barked again, staying just ahead of me, guiding me through the smoke until we stumbled out the front door into the cool night air. Whitaker collapsed onto the grass, wheezing. I fell beside him, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my smoke-stained cheeks. Max stood guard, barking wildly until the sound of sirens filled the air. For the first time, Whitaker wasn't my enemy. He was just a frail, scared old man, and my dog had just saved his life. Have you ever been surprised by an enemy turning into a friend? The fire trucks roared into the neighborhood within minutes, their red lights flashing across the dark street. Neighbors in pajamas and slippers spilled out of their houses, whispering in shock as firefighters rushed to douse the flames. I sat on the grass, coughing into my sleeve, my heart still hammering. Whitaker lay beside me, pale and shaken, but alive. Max pressed close to my side, his warm body trembling from the chaos. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one firefighter asked, crouching in front of me. I'm fine," I rasped, waving him off. "But he inhaled a lot of smoke." I pointed to Whitaker. The firefighter signaled to the paramedics, who hurried over with oxygen masks. They lifted Whitaker gently, placing the mask over his face. Through the clear plastic, his eyes met mine. For the first time, I didn't see anger or hatred in them. I saw something else. Confusion, maybe gratitude. His lips moved under the mask, forming words I couldn't quite hear. Neighbors gathered around, whispering. "Is he okay?" She pulled him out of the fire. And her dog, too. "Did you see?" Mrs. Diaz knelt beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Mija, you were so brave. That dog of yours, he's a hero." I looked down at Max, who wagged his tail weakly, still pressed against me as though protecting me from the world. The fire chief approached. "The damage is mostly in the kitchen, but the smoke spread fast. You got him out just in time. Another few minutes, and..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need him to. When the paramedics loaded Whitaker into the ambulance, he reached out suddenly and grabbed my hand. His grip was weak, trembling, but deliberate. Thank you, he whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking through the mask. And thank your dog. I swallowed hard, too stunned to respond before they closed the doors and drove away. The crowd dispersed slowly after that, but not before several neighbors came up to me. You did a good thing tonight. That dog deserves a medal. Whitaker's lucky you didn't give up on him. Their words blurred together, but one thing was clear. Max wasn't just the barking dog anymore. He was the dog who had saved a man's life. Later, back inside my house, I collapsed onto the couch. Max jumped up beside me, resting his big head on my lap like always. I stroked his fur, my hand still trembling. You did it, buddy, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. You saved him. Max let out a low sigh, his tail thumping softly against the cushion. He looked at me with those warm, trusting eyes as if he didn't understand the weight of what he'd just done. But I knew, and I had no idea how much that one night was going to change everything. Do you think dogs understand forgiveness better than humans? The next few days felt surreal. The fire was the talk of the neighborhood. Every time I stepped outside with Max, someone stopped me to ask how I was, to pet him, or to call him a hero. But the most unexpected part was Whitaker. 3 days after the fire, a knock rattled my front door. My stomach tightened when I peeked through the blinds and saw him standing there, leaning on a cane. His house was still being repaired, so he must have been staying elsewhere, but here he was, on my porch. I hesitated before opening the door. Max trotted over, tail wagging hesitantly, as if he wasn't sure how to feel. Mr. Whitaker, I said cautiously. He cleared his throat. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I wanted to thank you again, for saving my life, and for your dog. Without him, His voice cracked. I wouldn't be here. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say. This was the same man who had tried to spray Max with vinegar not long ago, but now his eyes were watery, his face lined not with anger, but with something else. Regret. Max was the real hero, I said finally, scratching behind his ears. Whitaker glanced at Max, and for the first time, there wasn't a scowl. Instead, he crouched slightly, extending a shaky hand. Max sniffed it, then licked his fingers gently. Whitaker let out a rough chuckle. Guess he doesn't hold grudges. Over the next week, everything began to change. Whitaker stopped avoiding me. In fact, he started talking to me, really talking. He apologized for the months of harassment, admitting he'd been lonely since his wife passed years ago, and bitterness had become his armor. I hated the barking because it reminded me of how quiet my house had become, he confessed one evening, standing by his fence while Max nosed around the yard. It wasn't your dog I hated, not really. It was what he represented. Life, noise, things I thought I'd lost. I was stunned. For so long, I had only seen him as the villain in my story. But now, hearing his truth, I saw him differently. He wasn't just a bitter old man, he was broken. Max seemed to sense it too. He took to sitting by the fence whenever Whitaker came outside, wagging his tail until Whitaker reached over to pat his head. One afternoon, Whitaker surprised me by asking, would you mind if I took Max for a short walk sometime? I could use the exercise, and maybe some company. My jaw nearly dropped. A few months ago, this man wanted Max gone. Now he wanted to walk him. Of course, I said softly, handing him the leash. Just don't spoil him too much. He's already got me wrapped around his paw. Whitaker chuckled, and for the first time, I saw him smile. Really smile. It was then I realized Max hadn't just saved Whitaker's life. He was saving his heart, too. What's the bravest thing you've ever seen an animal do? It was a crisp Sunday morning when I realized just how much had changed. I stood at my window, sipping coffee, watching as Whitaker strolled slowly down the street with Max trotting proudly at his side. The man who once cursed my dog now walked him like they'd been friends forever. Neighbors waved, smiling at the unlikely pair. Kids on bikes called out, "Hi, Mr. Whitaker." "Hi, Max." And Whitaker, grumpy, solitary Whitaker, actually waved back. I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. If someone had told me months ago that this would be my life, I would have said they were crazy. Later that afternoon, Whitaker stopped by with Max, who bounded happily back into the house, tail wagging like a helicopter. Whitaker leaned on his cane, his cheeks flushed from the walk. "He's strong for a mutt," he chuckled, handing me the leash. "Nearly pulled me over when he saw a squirrel." I smiled. "He does that with me, too." There was a pause, then Whitaker grew serious. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. I was cruel to you, to maximum. And yet when it mattered, you didn't hesitate to save me." I shrugged gently. "No one deserves to die alone in a fire, Mr. Whitaker. And besides, Max wouldn't have let me stay inside." His eyes softened. "You've got a good heart. And so does that dog." Over the following weeks, Whitaker became a fixture in our lives. He joined us for evening walks, sometimes bringing treats for Max. The neighborhood, once divided by his complaints, seemed warmer now, united by the story of the fire and the dog who saved him. Mrs. Diaz even joked, "See? Sometimes it takes a dog to fix what people can't." And she was right. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink, Whitaker and I sat on my porch. Max sprawled at our feet, chewing happily on a bone. "You know," Whitaker said quietly, "I spent so long being angry at the world, at life. Losing my wife broke me in ways I didn't even realize. But your dog, he reminded me that there's still good left. Still reasons to smile." I swallowed hard, emotion tightening my throat. "I'm glad he could do that for you." He looked at me, eyes shining. He saved more than just my life that night. He gave me a reason to live again. Max lifted his head then, as if he understood every word, and rested his paw gently on Whitaker's shoe. We both laughed softly, tears threatening to spill. In that moment, I realized the truth. Max hadn't just been my companion. He had been the bridge that healed an old man's heart, the reason a fractured neighborhood came together, and the reminder that sometimes love doesn't come where we expect it. It comes bounding toward us on four legs with a wagging tail and an endless capacity to forgive. And I knew, no matter what happened, Max would always be more than my dog. He was our hero. After this story, do you believe pets are angels in disguise?